Greetings. I'm the Reverend Jen Fenner of Epworth United Methodist Church. Today we find ourselves in the last verse of the first chapter of James. This is, in some ways, the signature verse of the whole book. And it says the following: religion, or the practice of faith that our God accepts as pure and faultless, is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. The whole book of James, in some ways, is summed up in this James chapter 1, verse 27. There are two things that God calls us to. First of all, to keep ourselves from becoming so polluted by this world that the injustice around us would corrupt our hearts and leave us bitter. That the struggle that we go through would somehow leave us calloused and unable to be compassionate and humble and grace-filled. To keep ourselves from this world that so easily fills us with values that are not of God. That's our first objective. And second, the book of James tells us we are called to look after orphans and widows in their distress. In order to understand what James is saying, we have to understand the Jewish understanding of widows and orphans. They are the most vulnerable. The children who do not have someone to provide for them. The children who are vulnerable and exposed. The women who no longer have a place of safety and security and home. The most vulnerable. We are called to practice our faith by literally defending those who are without defense. And of course, that takes 1,000 different forms. And of course, that walks us into advocacy and into justice. James says two things: keep yourself from being corrupted by this world, and keep your focus on caring for those who are vulnerable. And when our faith is about that, we have the ability not to get wrapped up in judgment, in our own self-doubt, in distraction, in practices that necessarily don't lead us into a deeper relationship with God and with others. If we're focused on connecting with, defending, walking with, caring for the most vulnerable, and keeping ourselves from being overwhelmed by the pollution in this world, our faith will be the kind of faith that God calls us to. What can you do today to make sure that your faith is practiced by caring for those who are in need? And what can you do today to keep yourself from being polluted by something that would corrupt your heart or lead you down a pathway that God would never want? Lord, thank you. Thank you for the concreteness, the simplicity, and the challenge of your word in James. God, thank you that you simply desire us to walk with you and walk with others in such a way that we practice who you have called us to be. Remind us today just how amazingly wonderful you are, and how much your love through us can change others. Use us and protect us in Jesus' name.